The Prime Minister is on his way back from London, where he spent the weekend meeting with world leaders to discuss trade and new opportunities for Canada.
I'm more certain than ever that there are endless possibilities for Canada. These possibilities will be realized through new partnerships between countries, with the private sector, with investors, with our allies.
It is the culmination of a very foreign policy-centered week. It began in New York, where Canada announced its recognition of the state of Palestine, a significant shift in policy we talked about on this show last week. Canada has also now officially restarted diplomatic relations with India. India's new High Commissioner started in his job just this past week in Ottawa. Carney is also talking about meeting the Chinese president soon. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Anita, Anand, joins me now in studio. Nice to see you, Minister.
Great to see you.
Appreciate making the time. I'm going to start with the United Nations and the Middle East because it's sort of what has happened over the past week. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech on Friday where he pledged to eliminate Hamas from Gaza, but he also said directly to Western leaders, and I will quote him here, "Israel will not allow you to shove a terror state down our throats." What do you make of that rebuke from the Prime Minister?
Well, the Government of Canada is in accordance with the view that Hamas can play no role in the future governance of Palestine. Hamas must lay down its weapons, Hamas must demilitarize and return the hostages. At the same time, it has been long-standing Canadian government policy to recognize two states, and that includes a state of Palestine living side by side in peace and security with Israel and Israelis.
But there are no interlocutors on either side that want those things right now.
Well, right now we actually have President Trump and Steve Witkoff engaged with the Arab states to discuss a potential peace plan. So to some extent there are interlocutors and there is a potential path forward. At the end of the day, we do want to see peace. That is what President Trump was speaking about in front of the General Assembly. And we need to ensure that the Palestinian Authority is part of this discussion. Our decision on recognition really rests on the Palestinian Authority fulfilling the promises in the Abbas letter that was sent to Prime Minister Carney.
Okay, well, on that, those were sort of the conditions that were laid out for Canada and others to make this recognition. But it doesn't really change anything on the ground. It certainly doesn't change anything for the people in Gaza. What will happen if the Palestinian Authority doesn't follow through on these conditions?
Well, I want to say and push back a little bit on this idea that it doesn't change anything. You're right. We recognize that this is not a panacea, this decision relating to recognition. But at the same time, it does represent long-standing Canadian government policy and values relating to self-determination of peoples. Sure. And the two-state solution was rapidly eroding given the Israeli government's decisions relating to annexation of the West Bank, relating to ensuring that food wasn't able to pass through land. And at the end of the day, the two-state solution policy is what we gave voice to in the decision to recognize at this time. Recognize that this is not a panacea, as I said, but it is one step in the process towards the two-state solution.
But the fact that the Israeli government, the current government, does not believe in a two-state solution right now, is not looking for one, I wonder what it means then to put this recognition on the table, given that they are not committed to finding that solution.
So I think you and we are remiss if we don't understand that over 140 countries have recognized the state of Palestine, and that it is an effort to give voice to international humanitarian law as well as the principle of self-determination of peoples.
I understand that, but when the other side, Israel in this case, wants nothing to do with the idea of peace talks, because that's what you're trying to propel them towards, I guess I'm just asking, what else will you do in order to make a difference here? Because,
Well, as I said,
Yeah.
recognition is one step
Sure.
in a process. And I spoke with Secretary Rubio numerous times this week at the United Nations to reiterate that we will work together and ensure that when there is a peace plan on the table that is in accordance with this idea that Hamas must lay down its weapons and that Hamas must return hostages and there can be no displacement of peoples, and the Palestinian Authority must have a role in the future governance of Palestine, that Canada would be at the table. And he specifically asked me to play a role in ensuring that we can bring countries on side if this policy is something that is in accordance with our foreign policy.
It's my understanding that it's been as much as 6 months since the Prime Minister spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know if you know any different, but that seems to be a long time. And I wonder if Canada is going to play this role that the Secretary Rubio has asked you to play, why the Prime Minister wouldn't be engaging with Benjamin Netanyahu as well.
I think that there are attempts to ensure that there's a dialogue in play, and for my part, I am also a representative of the Government of Canada, obviously fulfilling the role of interlocutor, and have been in touch with not only Secretary Rubio, the Palestinian Authority, and President Abbas, as well as Minister Gideon Saar early on in my initial appointment as the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So,
but does that mean that there are attempts to speak with the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they're not interested in speaking to us?
Dialogue occurs at many levels, and I'm sure that at least from the vantage point of the Government of Canada, I am positive that our approach is to make sure that we have open lines of communication across the board.
I want to move on because there's lots of topics.
So
as you
much.
know. Prime Minister Carney said that you would be visiting China soon.
Yes.
Do you know when you're doing that and what the primary goal of that is? Because the Prime Minister also said he hopes to meet with Xi Jinping when it makes sense. What can you tell me about what that trip might be and when it'll be?
Okay. In the coming weeks, I will be traveling to India, Singapore, and China. It is going to be an effort to ensure that we have relationships in the Indo-Pacific. We have an Indo-Pacific strategy dating back to 2022 that contemplates a greater presence for Canada in the Indo-Pacific, especially given that we are a Pacific nation ourselves, and especially given that we find ourselves in a moment of volatility geopolitically as well as economically. We are diversifying our trade relationships, and I, as Foreign Minister, am making sure that our diplomacy serves our domestic economic interests.
Is part of your goal on the China trip to have a conversation around the tariffs that are back and forth between the two countries to find some sort of way to alleviate the pressure on canola farmers and pork farmers and others?
Well, this will be my second in-person meeting with Wang Yi, the Foreign Minister of China, where as foreign ministers, we cover a range of issues, from the economy to defense and security to the broader bilateral relationships. So yes, everything's on the table.
On India, obviously there's an attempt right now to reset diplomatic relations between India. There's the ambassador, I think, was just appointed this past week, was sworn in, Nathalie Drouin, the security advisor for the Prime Minister, just came back from her trip to India, and she said that the Indian government has agreed to share information and help with the police investigation into the assassination in British Columbia. What do you know about how willing they have been to share information?
So let's take a step back to recognize that we have adopted a step-by-step approach with India to ensure that at every step of the way that we are stressing the importance of law enforcement domestically and an overall dialogue from a public safety standpoint. And so my Deputy Minister was with Nathalie Drouin last week to ensure that we have that law enforcement dialogue proceeding and that it is an eyes wide open conversation in terms of information sharing.
So they're collaborating, you would say, actively? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And I will also say that we put on the table the step-by-step approach that conversation is going well. You saw us appoint the high commissioners. We will have a conversation when I'm in India about what are the next steps in the diplomatic relationship. But again, we are being cautious and we will take this systematically.
One last question on Ukraine, if I can, because the President of the United States seemed to pivot on his position on Ukraine this week, saying that he believed Ukraine could take back its territory. I wonder, how do you interpret that? Is that the United States withdrawing from an attempt to engage in a peace process? Is that the President changing his perspective dramatically? I know you're not inside his head, but Canada's very engaged in Ukraine. So how did you take those comments, and what do you think they mean?
Well, they're very much on side the view that Canada has long held, that the Russian further invasion was illegal and unjustifiable and contrary to the rules-based international order that has kept us all safe since the end of the Second World War. And so in terms of NATO's position, as well as Canada's foreign policy, we are completely on side this priority to ensure that the territorial integrity of Ukraine, meaning Crimea as well, remains intact, and that the decisions about Ukraine's foreign policy rest with Ukraine itself. We are here, having already put $22 billion on the table to support Ukraine, military aid, humanitarian aid, financial aid. I met with Minister Sabia, the foreign minister. I also saw President Zelensky at our Bring the Ukrainian Children Home from Russia event that Prime Minister Carney and President Zelensky co-hosted. And let's just say the number of countries in the room was astounding. We are all on the same page about the need to bring this war to an end as soon as possible.
When you're the Minister of Foreign Affairs, you have to do a lot of topics, so I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much.
Talk soon.
Thank you. Overnight, Russia launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Kyiv and other parts of Ukraine in one of the most sustained attacks on the Ukrainian capital since the full-scale war began. At least 4 people were killed and dozens injured in the attack. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attack damaged residential buildings and factories, and it comes, as we were talking about there with the minister, as the president seemed to shift his position, the president of the United States, on the war in Ukraine. After meeting with Zelensky on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, Trump wrote in a social media post, "I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form." Trump had originally suggested Ukraine should be prepared to give up some land to Russia in order to reach a peace deal. Over the past year, Russia has expanded the amount of territory it controls. You can see the area in red on this map, which it currently occupies. Arseniy Yatsenyuk served as Prime Minister of Ukraine from 2014 to 2016. He's also the chairman of the Kyiv Security Forum, and he joins us this morning from Warsaw. Nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me, Rosemary.
What did you make of this seeming shift by the U.S. president to suggest that Ukraine can in fact win back all the territory lost to Russia with the help of NATO and Europe?
Let me start with the message to your foreign minister. Is it okay? Because I was listening to her. As she plans her trip to India and to China, I kindly request her to raise Ukrainian issue, as this is the biggest war since the World War II. China is providing the lifeline to Russia. China is providing the lifeline to North Korea, and they actually established a new axis of evil. China is sponsoring North Korea, and North Korea is sending its troops to Ukraine. So I kindly request the minister to raise this issue, not only about trade and tariffs, but about the global security, because we highly appreciate everything that Canadian people are doing for us. And it is in the interests of Canada to provide durable and fair peace for Ukraine. In terms of the U-turn of President Trump that you just asked, your foreign minister, she is a very smart politician, so she tried to be very cautious in responding to this question. So let me put it bluntly. I do welcome the new kind of approach by President Trump. And it sounds perfect that President Trump believes that Ukraine can regain its territory. And he said that this is completely doable with the support of the European Union. And then he mentioned NATO. I believe that he has mentioned and the United States. The US is an indispensable condition to win this war. So in terms of verbal gymnastics, we are perfect. But gymnastics is a kind of sport. So in the gym, in this particular geopolitical gym, I admire not gymnastics, but powerlifting. So we need powerlifting. We need clear-cut and strong and bold actions.
Yeah, I mean, some people interpret, and I think this is what you're getting at, former Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, is that the president was saying that in part because the U.S. plans to step back from the peace process and support of Ukraine. That the president, in fact, wants Europe to be doing more. Is that what you're suggesting? That's how we should interpret his comments?
Now I want to play politician. I want to be cautious,
Yes.
Saying that, look, I've had some rumors. Some pundits are telling that this is maybe the way how to turn back on Ukraine. But let me put it a different way. So I can hardly imagine how the United States of America can abandon Ukraine and turn its back on Ukraine and support dictators like Putin, who is under the umbrella made in China, okay? And with the stick made in North Korea and Iran and the rest of the pariahs. It is within the national security interest of the United States to support Ukraine. Every penny that Americans invested into Ukraine is the best ever investment into the national security and defense of the United States of America. Mm-hmm. So, after Anchorage, my guess is that designated war criminal Putin misread President Trump. So he wants to humiliate him because look what's happening. He believes that he got the green light. Today at night, Ukraine was attacked by more than 500 drones and 4 dozens of missiles. We have a kid, another kid is killed, of 12-year-old kid. So, and it's a never-ending story. This is the way Putin speaks. He clearly shows that he is not eager to cut any kind of deal, that he doesn't care about any kind of red carpet and limo sharing in Alaska. What he is caring about, he's caring about the new global order under the auspices of China, Russia, and another pariahs.
I only have a couple minutes left, and I appreciate how passionate you are, of course, about your country and the situation. But these comments, this change in position, if that's what it is, by the president, came as President Zelensky himself says that he believes Putin's preparing to attack another European country. And I wonder whether you think that that is true, and what you think would lead President Zelensky to believe that.
Rosemary, I do not think I see it. Look, I've been in a number of countries right now. And just to inform your audience, you know that Russians already made an incursion. So they sent their drones, fighter jets, to the NATO airspace. So they already violated a number of times NATO airspace. So they tested Article 5 of Washington Treaty. They test every single nation of the European Union and NATO. And they actually are showing to the entire world that they are ready to move further. And Putin will move as far as he allowed to. So the quicker we stop him, the better chance to restore the global order in the world.
Former Prime Minister of Ukraine, Arseniy Yatsenyuk, thank you for making time for us this morning. I know you were very busy and you squeezed us in. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. Take care.
It's been a busy start to the fall for Prime Minister Carney with a packed travel schedule to sell Canada abroad. In the last month, Carney has been to Ukraine, Germany, Poland, Latvia. That was followed by his trip 2 weeks ago, meeting with the Mexican president. He started the week, last week, at the United Nations General Assembly in New York before ending it in London for the Global Progress Action Summit. The Prime Minister is expected to head to Malaysia later next month for the ASEAN Summit of Southeast Asian nations, off to Korea after that for the APEC Forum with other Asia-Pacific leaders, followed by the November G20 Summit in South Africa. The Brazilian president has also invited Carney to COP30, but it's not clear if the Prime Minister will attend. So that gives you a sense of the busy time that the Prime Minister is having around the world, defending that time, saying that it's important to meet with world leaders in order to further the government's trade agenda and security agenda.
It's not just you sign a nice agreement and then something happens. No, you actually have to do the work. You have to meet with the leaders to make sure the work's being done. You have to mark progress as it's being done. which is what we're doing with the various European leaders to make sure Canadians and Europeans, but Canadians, my job, get the full benefit of these agreements that we're making with them.
Yet another costly and useless photo op tour to escape the inflation, criminality, housing price crisis, and of course the scandal around his public safety minister.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre taking issue there with the Prime Minister's spending time abroad and traveling. So let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Charelle Evelyn is the managing editor of the Hill Times in Ottawa. Robert Benzie is the Queen's Park bureau chief for the Toronto Star. He's in Toronto. And Tyler Dawson is an Alberta correspondent for the National Post. He's in Edmonton. Good to see you all this morning. It's true. The Prime Minister has been traveling a lot. It is also true that part of his agenda is to try and create new trading relationships, find closer allies, to build security relationships. He's trying to attract investment. But if you take this trip to London, for instance, Charelle, there was nothing that came out of it of substance, at least of this trip. So what do you make of this criticism? Is any of it warranted, or are the explanations from the government, do they make sense?
Well, I think there's actually a little bit of both in there because, look, people want FaceTime with Canada. People want to talk to Canada. What I keep hearing is that, countries are trying to get Canada's attention, and to have the Prime Minister of the country come and speak to you, that's about as much attention as you're going to get. Saying that the Prime Minister, he's only been to a handful of question periods since Parliament returned. Sure, you can say that could signal that he's paying less attention to some domestic issues, but when it comes to saying that, these are photo ops and et cetera, there is a lot to be said for relationship building. Yes, you can pick up a phone and have a conversation with somebody, but a lot of these places, and in a lot of places that aren't, here, they really value FaceTime. And if you're not there putting your face out there, you're going to get ignored. And that is really, a major criticism that we saw from the Trudeau government as well. They would make a big splash, and then they would never be heard from again. And people would have a really difficult time, even getting them on the phone. So that was another issue. So then when they're not in the room, you also hear the same criticism. We saw it with, when the leaders went down to Washington and Carney wasn't there. And then it turned into, Carney's not getting the job done, he's being ignored, et cetera. So it's a bit of a lose-lose on that front. But if it does turn into something that is tangible, then in hindsight, I suppose it'll look like a win.
Yeah. In other words, you can't do anything right when you're Prime Minister, I guess is what the analysis is. But I have a hard time believing that Pierre Poilievre, if he were Prime Minister, would not be, maybe not as many trips, but he would be on most of these trips. That would be the expectation. I guess Charelle's point is, Rob, at some point the government has to deliver on some of these things as well. They have to say, listen, we went there and we got this.
Yeah, exactly, Rosie. It's been 5 months since the Prime Minister was elected. He made some big promises in that campaign. And I think Canadians at some point are going to expect to see the rubber hit the road. The polls suggest that so far voters are giving him, cutting him some slack. If an election were held tomorrow, the polls that I've seen and the polls that we've all seen suggest he would at least hold his own and possibly even get a majority, because he's pretty close to having one. But I think as Carney tries to diversify Canada's trade, so we're not as reliant on the United States with Donald Trump's mercurial behavior, this tariff war with our country that is causing havoc, especially here where I live in Ontario. It's really, really hurting the economy here, and it's unemployment is high, and new jobs are scarce. I think as he tries to do that, he's going to have to show some results, though, Rosie. He's going to have to show something tangible. He's an internationalist. We know that as Bank of England governor, as Bank of Canada governor, he was very comfortable in this milieu, with at these international meetings. But he is going to have some deliverable at some point. The budget's in November. He's going to have to show Canadians something before then, I think.
Yeah, Tyler, what do you think? How do you see this from when you're in Alberta? Is it just Ottawa doing what Ottawa does, or is there something to the criticism and the questions around the travel?
Yeah, I think as Charelle said, it's a little bit of both. I mean, Justin Trudeau found out to his misfortune that there is a bit of a populist streak in Canada when it comes to travel. Even if the tone of the Carney government going abroad is very, very different from that of the Trudeau government when they were abroad. But I think they do need to be leery of some of that shine coming off. And I think the other point is when it comes to tangibles, it's all fine and good to say have a new free trade deal if that is signed, be able to wave that piece of paper around. But I think what people are going to be looking for is those new jobs, those new investments, not pieces of paper that government officials have been waving around. And that strikes me as even further down the road probably than some sort of agreement. So I do think that the Carney government is in a little bit of a risky position on this right now.